Overture Solutions, a leader in secure document printing and a privileged partner in digital transformation, is proud to bring its official support to the group of SIDS Leaders Conference.
Welcome to this virtual conference of the Small Island Developing States Leaders Group. I'm Juliette Foster, and I'll be guiding you through 90 minutes of what I'm sure will be informed, lively and thought-provoking discussion on small island state policy development, taking place against the background of a damaging pandemic. Now, as we all know, COVID-19 is dominating the global conversation, with infection and mortality rates still ominous as the emphasis shifts to the equitable distribution of vaccines. What hasn't changed is the ongoing speculation about what the future will look like in a post-pandemic world, or indeed how it will affect small island developing states. Well, this is one of the reasons why we're here, because the virus has presented us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to draw a roadmap where everyone has a viable stake. This is especially true of small islands, better known under the acronym SIDS. Just to put this in context, these are a small, distinct group of 38 UN member states and 20 non-UN members or associate members that face unique social, economic, and indeed environmental vulnerabilities. Now, COVID may have exposed human frailties, but it's also given over 63 million people in small island developing states a chance to have their voices heard and assert a role that goes beyond that of marginal contributors in any reconstruction. Now, the arrival of the revised Cotonou Agreement between the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States is therefore very timely when we view it in that context. The deal itself amplifies those voices because, remember, 48% of the ACP members and 71% of Commonwealth members are small island developing states and represent 20% of the UN membership. So the big question, why should highly developed countries listen to 63 million voices? Quite simply because the issues that affect them impact all of us. In other words, their problems are our problems too. Continuing restrictions on access to financial resources directed at SIDS countries limits their ability to implement trade and environmental agreements. Likewise, climate change has impacted them in sustaining their indigenous and vulnerable economies. So how much of a game changer is the revised Cotonou Agreement? And does it give genuine political and economic clout to its SIDS OACP signatories? Well, these are amongst the issues to be explored by our distinguished panel of experts. What's going to happen is that some of them will have 5 minutes to outline their case, after which there will be a discussion. Some of our panelists will be speaking for a little bit longer, 10 or 12 minutes. But because we only have 90 minutes, I will personally alert the panel with a time interjection when there are 2 minutes remaining on their speeches. So please do stick to your allocated time slots. Okay, that's the housekeeping. I'd now like to hand the floor for some words of welcome to His Excellency David Doyle, who's the Ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis to UNESCO and also one of the instigators of this global SIDS Leaders Group. So Ambassador Doyle, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Juliette. Good morning and greetings to the distinguished panel of speakers and, of course, to you, the audience. Welcome to this, the first event of the Global SIDS Leaders Initiative, dedicated to the implications of the Cotonou Agreement on SIDS, this multitude of small island developing states across the globe. Over the coming months, this group will be exploring a range of topics associated with small island developing states, from covering the adverse impact of climate change to access vis-a-vis concessionary and innovating finance, from challenges of integrating ITC across all sectors, education, industry and healthcare, to strengthening food and agricultural security, to mention but a few of the topics. Now, the genesis of this this particular group and the debates, indeed, is driven by the need to raise the profile and, more importantly, the voice of small islands on the international agenda. The objective is to secure a better understanding of small islands' specific challenges, build mutual support at key international, transnational and regional negotiations, and ensure ultimately that small island states are an integral part to the solutions of the big issues that we are facing today, whether it be climate change or combating COVID-19. You know, one of the key characteristics of these islands is that they transcend 4 regions across the globe, from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean, from the Atlantic to the Caribbean, collectively representing 1/5 of all UN membership. Yet, the remoteness, the size, limited institutional capacity on the ground, sometimes and frequently results in these islands facing particular challenges in getting their collective voice heard at bilateral and international level discussions. Ultimately, the purpose of this global SIDS leadership initiative is to seek to inscribe SIDS concerns, risks, opportunities, and strengths on the global agenda. Thank you for listening and enjoy today's debate. Back to you, Juliet. Thank you.
Ambassador, many thanks for that. I would now like to hand the floor to His Excellency Jean-Paul Cateron, who is the Ambassador of the Solomon Islands to UNESCO and the FAO. He also co-chairs the GSL group. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juliette. A few words in French for French-speaking attendees. Je voudrais vous souhaiter à tous la bienvenue. Les SIDS sont des petits pays et ce sont des petits pays qui ont des gros problèmes. Et à la suite de multiples années de globalisation abusive dans certains domaines et maintenant de pandémie, les pays sont encore plus petits et les problèmes sont encore plus gros. Nous avons la nécessité de revisiter notre multilatéralisme et je vous donne rapidement un exemple. On parle à la FAO d'alimentation, d'agriculture et de sécurité alimentaire. On parle à l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, on parle de santé publique. Dans les îles du Pacifique, la santé publique dépend essentiellement de l'alimentation et de l'agriculture. Les maladies qui dévastent nos îles dans le Pacifique sont essentiellement des maladies non transmissibles, c'est-à-dire le diabète et l'obésité. Donc, il y a un problème et il y a un lien direct entre le développement de l'agriculture et la santé de la population. Pourquoi y a-t-il ce lien? Parce qu'il n'y a pas d'éducation à l'alimentation. C'est-à-dire qu'on parle d'éducation à l'UNESCO, mais on ne parle pas de la nécessité de former et d'éduquer au respect de soi-même et au bien-être de soi-même sur le plan de la santé. Et puis, si l'on veut reprendre tout cela et fixer une gouvernance qui soit efficace et dynamique, il faut un capacity building programme qui soit à même de former les gouvernements et les hauts responsables à l'approche de ce genre de problème. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut plus parler d'agriculture à la FAO, on ne peut plus parler de santé à l'OMS, d'éducation à l'UNESCO, de capacity building à l'UNITO sans fédérer tout cela et agir d'une manière conjointe et véritablement constructive. Voilà pourquoi nous avons pris cette initiative d'aborder les problématiques des SIDS de manière transversale. On ne peut plus maintenant parler et travailler entre soi. Et il y a en plus, je voudrais le souligner, à cause d'un défaut de ressources humaines et d'un défaut de ressources financières, une quasi-impossibilité pour ces pays d'être représentés dans les organisations internationales. Et ça, c'est un énorme problème auquel nous faisons face tous les jours. Où sont les SIDS? Comment peut-on aider les SIDS? Comment peut-on véritablement favoriser leur évolution et leur développement? C'est pour ça que l'accord de Cotonou est important. C'est pour ça que le soutien de l'Union européenne dans tous les domaines de la vie sociétale est quelque chose d'essentiel. C'est en fait l'introduction à la série de vidéoconférences que nous allons faire. Alors, je voudrais vous remercier tous d'avoir accepté de participer à cette rencontre et puis remercier particulièrement M. Reinders. Je connais M. Reinders depuis très longtemps et c'est un homme d'État. Il a l'expérience de la gouvernance au niveau national, il a une expérience très longue des affaires européennes, et je pense que pour nous, qui représentons des pays en difficulté, il est l'interlocuteur et surtout il représente la dimension humaine nécessaire à l'approche et au traitement de nos problèmes. Merci beaucoup. Je donne donc, d'après le scénario, la parole à M. Reinders, commissaire européen à la justice.
Merci beaucoup, M. Garteron. Et je voudrais vous dire que je suis très heureux de retrouver un certain nombre de représentants des CITES aujourd'hui. J'ai eu l'occasion d'avoir des contacts dans d'autres fonctions au préalable. Et je voudrais vous dire quelques mots sur le multilatéralisme, évidemment, auquel nous sommes tellement attachés, et quelques mots de deux éléments majeurs que nous mettons en avant dans ce multilatéralisme, parce que ça fait une partie intégrante de l'ADN de l'Union européenne, la solidarité et l'état de droit. But I will switch maybe to English to explain that we are committed to multilateralism. And first of all, to say that solidarity is part of who we are as Europeans and between one another. It is therefore part of who we are beyond our borders. And for example, because we are in a pandemic for the moment, as we work to procure vaccinations for Europeans, we made a commitment to ensuring universal access to vaccines everywhere on Earth, including the Solomon Islands, which last month became the second country in the Pacific Islands to receive doses via the COVAX facility. And you know that the European Union is the first donator for COVAX in this process. As an international institution ourselves, we have always and will always believe in multilateralism where every voice counts. For example, it is well known that without small island states working together with the European Union, days before the deadline in Paris, the historic climate agreement, the Paris Agreement, should never have been achieved. So it's very important to continue to work very close together. And I would say that we try so to do the same when we discuss about the rule of law. We try to have the same external policy than the internal policy. I don't want to enter into details, but the integrity of the building of the rule of law in the EU is an important part, of course, of our action. It still has, like any UNESCO World Heritage Site, a universal value to humanity. But as for any landmark of such value, it requires constant care, reparation, and sometimes modernization. I want just to say that we are working on the rule of law at home in the European Union to be able to discuss on the rule of law with some partners. And I want to describe all the details, but we have the capacity in the European Union now to provide every year a report on the rule of law. It's a preventive tool to describe the situation in all the 27 member states. I've started last year with the presentation in September of the first rule of law report, and I will go to the second edition in July about independence of the justice system, fight against corruption, media pluralism, and all the checks and balances in the institutional order. We have that to prevent different kind of negative evolutions about the rule of law, but also to exchange best practices. Of course, if it's not enough, we have the capacity to go to the Court of Justice at the EU level for infringements. It's also possible to use a very big tool, the Article 7 of our treaty, to suspend the voting rights of the member states if there are real breaches to the rule of law. And now we'll have also the possibility to make a link between the funding of different policies and the rule of law. And that's an important part because we'll discuss the same with the partners. And for the moment, we have the same discussions with the candidate countries in the Balkans, to give an example, the Western Balkans, but we have also the same discussions with our partner in Africa, in the Pacific Islands, and in the Caribbean. And it's very important to us to work on this. And I believe that it's important to have such a conversation with you today because the EU is firmly committed to supporting others' nurture to rule of law in any way we can. And as I said before, it is important to us at home, therefore, it is reflected in all external relations, including with many of you across all areas of the rule of law. Across the Pacific and the Caribbean, the EU is supporting the protection of fundamental rights. This is something we have a lot of experience at home, notably for women, children, and LGBTIQ people. To improve the transparency of public finance management, we are also providing technical assistance to the Office of the Auditor General in the Solomon Islands. We are providing support and technical assistance to our partners in the Caribbean through bilateral and regional interventions, including dedicated budget support programs. To improve access to justice in Fiji, the European Union is supporting justice sector reform to improve the delivery and accessibility of justice services for children and vulnerable people. And through our budget support, we have accompanied Jamaica's efforts in modernizing its justice system and strengthening the institutional and administrative capacity of justice institutions as part of structural reforms. This is also the type of support the European Union is providing to its own member states, because we want to develop such a kind of capacity at home, like I said, but we want also to support such a kind of development with our partners. For example, we are in the process of setting up in the European Union a European Public Prosecutor Office to investigate crimes against the budget in the EU. And of course, we are very open to share our experience in such a way with the different partners. And we discussed that to exchange best practices among member states. Last month, we have had again at the EU level a discussion about the rule of law in countries like Germany, France, Ireland, Greece, and Spain together to exchange the best practice and to see what are the possible developments. Of course, the media, it's an important part of the rule of law discussion. The nation of journalist Georges Chikoti in Greece outside his home last month was again underlined the EU's need to step up its work to protect journalists. Last year, we provided over 4 million euros to do this in the EU, and we want to work with our partners to be sure that it's possible to protect journalists also when they are investigating in different kind of issues and sometimes very sensitive issues. And we are, as you know very well, at the beginning of a new era in the EU's relation with the Pacific and Caribbean regions. Only a few weeks ago, my colleague, Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen,
2 minutes, Monsieur, 2 minutes.
Yes, took part, I will conclude, in the initialing with Togolese Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor Robert Dussey, of the new partnership agreement between the European Union and members of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. This was a major political achievement, and the negotiated agreement between the EU and our largest group of partner countries is entirely in tune with the international challenges and realities of today. And it will set up together as an international force to be reckoned with. We know, all of us in this partnership, that when we combine forces, as we did, I said, in Paris for the Paris Agreement, great things can be achieved. And so we will promote solidarity, rule of law, and all the values that we have in common. And we want to see that with all Pacific partners, for example, the focus is on building democracy and to build also peaceful and rights-based societies anchored by rule of law again and good governance. With our Caribbean partners, there is a focus on inclusivity and security in society, along with other priorities such as promoting again the rule of law, gender equality, and human rights. The smooth negotiations on the rule of law in both cases underline our shared values and vision on access to justice and consolidating the rule of law. And we will continue to work like this. As many Europeans did, so too did many Icelanders risk their lives for a world free from tyranny. Because you know that if we are speaking so much about the rule of law in the EU, it's because we have started the construction of our union after the Second World War. And as US Admiral William Halsey famously said, Guadalcanal saved the Pacific. In the 78 years since the decisive victory against totalitarianism, we have been on the same page. I said a moment ago that the new partnership agreements are also entirely in tune with the realities and international challenge of today. And I want to conclude to say that it will be important to us to continue to share the same values, to try to help not only member states in the EU, but also many countries in our partnership with Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific Islands to develop their economic and social capacity in a good way, with an open society. And again, I will be very pleased to listen to the comments today in such a way, because it's not just an economic partnership. I want to insist on this. It's a partnership based on values, and we need to continue to promote those values in a multilateral development, because you know that in the last years it was very difficult to take part in multilateral discussions due to a specific approach in the US. But now, maybe with the new US administration, with an agreement like the Cotonou Agreement, it will be possible to go back to more and more multilateral discussions. So thanks for such an opportunity to say some words to you about our vision on the multilateralism in relation with solidarity, with human rights, and with the rule of law. But again, I will be very pleased to listen to your comments.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. Please stay with me, because there is a question that I'd like to put to you, because we know that so many things are happening. There are multiple other trade agreements between larger regional powers, intense deliberations happening on climate change between the likes of the European Union, China, and the United States. And I want you to put something in context. You referenced it, in fact, in that speech. How important is the Cotonou Agreement for SIDS when we view it in the wider multilateral context?
I said that before about the Paris Agreement. We have seen that when we have had to discuss about climate change, it was very useful to be on the same line with so many different partners. And with the Cotonou Agreement, we are working with many partners, not only in the region of the Caribbean and in the Pacific Islands, but also in Africa. And of course, I'm very pleased to say that when we are discussing on different kind of issues, it's very important to show that we are not alone. We try to do the same, to be very concrete, with the new partnership between the European Union and the US. We have put on the table a new agenda, not only to try to see if it's possible to reach some agreement between us, but also to take part together in international discussions. And the new structure of the agreement maintains the overall framework for cooperation with the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific group of states, while deepening the partnership with each region, taking into account the regional specificities, challenges, and vision. But in such an agreement, that will give us also the possibility not only to take into account the specificities of the different partners, but to try to have an influence together at the worldwide level. And again, not only in discussions for new agreements like the Paris Agreement, but maybe also in different international organizations, like in the UN. Of course, I have had many opportunities to discuss with members of the SIDS in the UN, but I'm thinking also about the WHO when we are discussing about the pandemic. So with such an agreement now, we are reinforcing our capacity to be aligned and to work together in multilateral discussions.
Okay, so a wonderful note on which to end that question, but thank you so much for that, Commissioner Reinders. I'd now like to hand the floor to His Excellency Georges Rebelo Pinto Chikoti. Now, he is the Secretary General of the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, and also a former Angolan minister. He will be giving a presentation. Excellency, the floor is yours. You have 12 minutes. 12 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me, on the outset, thank the statement of the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, and as well the statements made earlier by the Commissioner Reinders, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium. Your Excellencies and dear colleagues, it is indeed an honor to have been invited to participate in this event today, which is at a unique time in the history of the OACPS. States, the 79 members strong OACPS represents a population of about 1.1 billion peoples scattered across the blue planet. We have just a few short weeks ago initialed the new OACPS EU Partnership Agreement, comprising a foundation agreement and 3 regional protocols, one of each for Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. The negotiations, which lasted 2.5 years, were at times intense, but we are very happy the agreement addresses OACPS challenges, issues and opportunities, and importantly, the unique challenges and concomitant vulnerabilities of the 38 small island developing states of the OACPS, situated in the 4 of the 6 OACPS regions. Excellencies, I can attest that throughout the course of the negotiations, our OACPS political hierarchy remained engaged and were very vocal about the responsibility of all parties to acknowledge the unique characteristics and issues of OACP's small island developing states. This message has permeated SEED's issues throughout the final negotiated OACPS EU Foundation Agreement text and in the 3 regional protocols. It is self-evident in the articles throughout the entire agreement, which in number 1 supports the principles of multilateral engagement with our international partners, and number 2 acknowledges the challenges and vulnerability of small island developing states, as well as the environment and climate change. Number 3, it calls for global health security and governance, particularly relevant in today's ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Number 4, it supports inclusive economic growth and development and upholds the right to secure livelihoods, the right to democracy and human rights. It defends the rights to protect the most vulnerable echelons of our societies, including women and youth. At the level of the OACPS, we pursue the SEEDS agenda through the OACPS SEEDS Forum, which is an established subsidiary and consultative organ under our revised constitution, the revised Georgetown Agreement. The OACPS SEEDS Forum brings together the 38 OACPS SEEDS members who have much in common, including inter alia, their small size, narrow resource base, multiple forms of poverty, and some debt distress from impacts of the climate crisis, disaster risks from natural hazards, and more recently, impacts of other exogenous shocks such as the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the OACPS SEEDS Forum, our Brussels-based ambassadors, under the leadership of its incumbent coordinator, Ambassador Joy Ann Skinner of Barbados, have identified the following as priorities for OACPS SEEDS in 2021. 1, access to finance. 2, addressing debt and debt sustainability. 3, climate action. 4, ocean governance and blue economy. 5, developing and multidimensional vulnerability index. 6, health COVID-19 action plan. We are conscious that we need to actively monitor SEEDS interests within the context of other key multilateral instruments, such as the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, the Samoa Pathway, and our own Georgetown revised agreement adopted in 2019. The recently concluded OACPS EU Foundation Agreement of our new partnership with the European Union for the next 20 years is also no exception. Under the new OACPS EU Partnership Agreement, concrete action in support of SIDS will require coordination, joint advocacy, and enhanced policy dialogue if we are to effectively address SIDS vulnerabilities in the trade services, tourism, agriculture, and financial sectors. Of paramount importance will be our joint efforts to develop a composite, multidimensional vulnerability index and ensure regular, open, and inclusive engagement between all EU and OACPS SIDS stakeholders. The challenge for OACPS SIDS is to focus on building resilience. We have taken careful note of recent public statements of commitments and offers of assistance to vulnerable developing states to transition to low carbon pathways made by developed countries' leaders in last month's Global Climate Summit. As we prepare for COP26, it is crucial that we join forces and apply OACPS climate diplomacy and advocacy action on SIDS priority issues as we reiterate and reinforce the common but differentiated responsibilities of the EU and all our global partners. The OACPS stands ready to facilitate this process. As I come to the end of my statement, Your Excellencies, I'm being called to another meeting, but my ASG for Environment and Climate Action will continue to be present with you in this meeting. And I thank you very much for having invited us today to be with you and to say we are committed to the issues and challenges related to the SIDS, small and developing countries. I thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. As he said, he has to leave us, but do not fear, because the Assistant Secretary General, Christel Pratt, she will be joining us and also answering questions in the discussion which follows later. Christel Pratt, it's good to see you. I'd like to put this question to you because, look, the word specifics has been mentioned a great deal in this meeting, but what do you regard as the main achievements to arise from this agreement in terms of how it benefits SIDS and their citizens?
I think that the Secretary General, our Secretary General Chikoti, in his opening statement actually attested to the fact that throughout the negotiations, the OACPS political hierarchy really engaged and advocated for the responsibility of all the parties to acknowledge the unique characteristics and the issues of OACPS SIDS throughout the foundation agreement and the regional protocols. And so if one actually analyzes the foundation agreement and the protocols, you would find many articles that are supportive of SIDS, whether they are least developed countries or middle income countries. And so in the interest of time, I'll just highlight a few special references to SIDS, which can be found in Title V, Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change. Those are Articles 54.3 and 54.4. And more specifically on ocean, seas and marine resources, climate action, Article 58.1, climate change and security, and then disaster risk reduction and management, Article 60.1 through to 60.5. But I think that importantly, in the case of the Caribbean and Pacific regional protocols, one could say that they are SIDS-centric and SIDS-specific, as all OACPS member states from these two regions are in fact SIDS, and they make up 31 of our 38 small island developing states of the 79 member strong OACPS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the post-Cotonou agreement address obstacles on mid-income SIDS trying to access official development funding? And how will the criteria and fund deployment evolve?
I think in answering this question, it may be prudent to highlight a particular article, that is Article 82.1 on international development cooperation, which states that the EU is committed to sustainable development and the allocation of financial resources to combat environmental degradation and climate change. And then I'd like to quote directly from the Foundation Agreement, and I'll quote, "Due attention will be paid to the specific challenges of middle-income countries, including their inequality, exclusion, and access to resources," unquote. And so how this manifests for OACPS SIDS with middle-income country status will really be determined by the OACPS and the EU as we discuss and elaborate implementation modalities and arrangements. And so I think that's the short answer to that. But I also think that it really depends on our combined efforts with key partners such as the Commonwealth Secretariat and others to develop a universal or a multidimensional vulnerability index. And this has been said time and again by Secretary-General Scotland and my own Secretary-General Chikoti in this meeting, because it is important for all of us. And it is important as we reiterate and reinforce the common but differentiated responsibilities of our global partners, including the European Union. And I think most importantly, it is really about how we meet our objectives for our peoples in terms of our sustainable development objectives and to build resilience to this climate crisis, as well as, other risks that challenge us day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, those who have been part of this really fascinating panel, and all of you who joined us online. We appreciate your presence. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, and I hope to see you all sometime in the not too distant future. Take care. Merci. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Au revoir. Have a good day.
Overture Solutions, leader in secure document printing and a privileged partner in digital transformation, was proud to bring its official support to the Group of SIDS Leaders Conference.